1 minute ago at Paris trial, Jackson releases her father's letter. He warned me about Diddy. 1 minute ago, Michael Jackson's daughter arrives in court with shocking evidence. My dad warned me about Diddy. According to testimony at the scene, the letter was written by Michael Jackson himself in early 2008, just 18 months before his death. The letter contained specific warnings about hidden forces in the entertainment industry, with details that overlap significantly with the evidence presented in the Diddy case, especially the mention of a person with the designation SC, a person of particular interest to federal investigators. Ladies and gentlemen, with this action, the Diddy case is now about more than just accusations. It is expanding into a potentially vast dossier involving hidden networks, powerful names, and most importantly, a warning from the past. One thing is clear: Michael Jackson, who once used music to speak the truth, seems to have left behind not only an artistic legacy, but also a survival manual delivered at just the right time. Before we dive deeper, a content warning: the following testimony includes references to psychological manipulation, potential systemic abuse, and coded allegations. Viewer discretion is advised. These accounts are presented solely for educational and journalistic exploration. Now, let's begin. The envelope, slightly worn and marked "For Paris, not before you're 21, was the first clue. Inside, a 3-page handwritten letter from Michael Joseph Jackson, dated early 2008, 18 months before his death. There are people in this industry I was told to never name, but your safety means more to me than silence. A chilling phrase, and only the beginning. He spoke of houses in the hills, where no music played, only silence and instruction. He warned her of rooms where mirrors are tools, not decor, of contracts hidden in corners that didn't exist. And then came the name, or rather the initials, SC. In courtroom documents, investigators had already flagged these same letters. SC, a shadowy presence threading through internal memos, compliance documents, and anonymous witness statements related to the Diddy trial. Now Michael Jackson, arguably the most powerful solo artist in music history, was tying SC to the same hidden machinery, and to Paris's future. When asked by the judge who wrote the letter, Paris responded clearly: Michael Joseph Jackson, my father. But what did he mean by SC is not a producer, he is a system who is the velvet hand. And why now does that connect so directly to Diddy? The courtroom was silent, but online theories exploded. Paris's testimony described a 2008 winter when her father became obsessed with shielding her from the industry. He reportedly warned her of foundations offering mentorship. That's where they hide, he had told her. In his own words, Combs was the courier, not the king. And while the public had never heard these claims until now, the parallels to allegations within the Diddy case were striking. What followed next unraveled a map of Michael Jackson's private fears. Notes from 2006 showed his security team was instructed not to allow SC past Gate B, even if the name is changed. That note, now public, included the chilling term, velvet voice, velvet hand, with no recordings when he visits, underlined twice. Sound familiar? Witnesses in the Diddy case have described velvet men arriving unannounced, often late at night, to escort individuals from parties, hotels, or studios. Discreet, silent, disappearing as quickly as they came. But could this really be more than industry mythology? In 2011, Diddy purchased a home in the Hollywood Hills under a shell corporation. Blueprints now entered into evidence showed a circular main living room. No sharp corners, an underground studio marked Phase C, and a room with glass walls but no ceiling, labeled Visual Reorientation Suite. These weren't design choices. They were strategy. Michael had written to Paris, "They put you in glass so you think it's freedom. But glass bends the light and hides what's really happening." He had tried to warn her, tried to warn us, and Paris didn't just bring the letter. She brought the receipts. An authenticated diary entry from 2009 quotes Michael, They want me to echo something that doesn't belong to me. What does that mean? An artist echoing, not singing. Is this about manipulation, branding, programming? And it's not just paranoia. Multiple victims tied to the Diddy case have echoed, no pun intended, the same idea. That they were taught to deliver influence through choreography. That their clothing, their movements, their presence was part of a larger system. Not art, not marketing, obedience. And then came Paris's turning point. At 18, she received an email from Luca S., a representative of what he called a private music consortium. He offered her a chance to be the next message carrier, not a star, not a performer, message carrier. Exactly the same phrase repeated by 3 other witnesses under oath in this trial. Paris declined, and then, just as her father warned, the curtain fell. A canceled cover story, sudden online backlash, collapsed collaborations. It was like someone flipped a switch, she testified. I went from legacy to instability, just like he warned me. Then came the footage, a never-before-seen video from 2009, intended for family archives. Michael Jackson, in rehearsal mid-song, suddenly stares directly into the camera and mouths, "Tell Paris mirror light is false." The clip was paused, replayed 3 times. This wasn't a metaphor. This was the method. So what do we make of it all? Can memory be manipulated through the environment? Can silence be programmed? Can velvet be weaponized? Paris Jackson believes so, and she's not alone. In her final moment on the stand that day, she pulled out a small red envelope from her coat. Inside a USB, labeled Jackson Vault, T 2011, for Paris if they ever ask. It contained a 91-second audio file, Michael Jackson's voice, clear, soft-pained. They used to call it a gift. Then they called it a product. Then they said, "We'll take it from here." Silence. Then they build the walls with compliments and fill the rooms with velvet. And finally, when you try to leave, they say you're hurting the ones who believed in you. As the audio ended, the courtroom sat frozen. If the velvet system is real, if the warnings were real, then how deep does this go? Paris Jackson didn't bring emotion. She brought documentation, testimony, audio, architectural design, correspondence, repetition from other victims. This wasn't a daughter's grief. This was the beginning of something else. And as we prepare for part 2, the witness who stood beside Michael in those final years, we must ask ourselves, was this legacy protection or was it preemptive testimony? The courtroom was still echoing from Paris Jackson's stunning submission when the next witness was called to the stand. James Lurrell, former personal security chief to Michael Jackson during the final years of his life. A man rarely seen, even more rarely heard, until today. Clutching a single folder, he stepped forward, face composed but cautious. He didn't come with dramatic flair. He came with memory, and what he remembered reshaped everything. Michael trusted very few people near the end, Laurel began. But there were moments he let the mask slip. And what he told me changed everything I thought I knew about that world. Let's rewind. James Laurel was present at dozens of events, from rehearsals to high-profile galas. But one moment stood out. A private party, early 2009, hosted by what he called a powerful group of executives. It wasn't advertised. No cameras, no entourage, just selected guests, quiet, controlled. Michael was scheduled to perform. But when he walked in, Laurel said he froze. The stage was like no other. Red glass flooring, ceiling-to-floor mirrors, 3 white spotlights, no microphones, just a couch. Michael looked at him and whispered, "This isn't a concert. This is a contract ceremony." What is a contract ceremony? In insider circles, it refers to symbolic performances designed to formalize unspoken influence, where appearance alone signifies agreement, where silence means compliance. Michael refused to perform. "They want me to echo something that doesn't belong to me," he said. He left the venue. No footage of the event exists. 3 months later, James made a discovery inside Michael's dressing room. A subtle glint in the mirror's edge. Upon unscrewing the frame, he found a concealed mic disguised as a light bulb and a wire running behind the wall. Michael said calmly but firmly, "They always watch the voice, especially when it's trying to heal." Court documents later confirmed that the photo of this setup was authenticated and dated. One microphone, one lens, installed without Michael's knowledge. But this isn't just surveillance, it's about voice control. James explained he believed the system didn't just want to hear what he sang. It wanted to control how his sound moved people, how it resonated. They study resonance, not lyrics Michael wrote in a private journal. It's why they let you sing as long as you don't feel. It sounds abstract, almost paranoid. Until you realize multiple witnesses in the Diddy trial have used strikingly similar language, the room where you leave yourself behind. The test of whether you echo or resist. He made it feel luxurious, like you were lucky. Could this be a pattern? James Laurel wasn't the only one to mention a red room. Several victims referred to it as both a place and a process and initiation into silence. One dancer testified it wasn't a place, it was a decision. You walked in whole. You came out echoing. Another said, "You're not asked to agree. You're shown what happens when you resist." Now, Paris's father, Michael Jackson, was describing the same thing years earlier, and he didn't just warn with words. According to James, Michael embedded coded protection into his own estate documents. A line in his 2002 will read, "No inheritance may be used to activate the Velvet Clause." Legal counsel at the time dismissed it as symbolic. Now it's understood as literal. And here's why that matters. Federal agents recently uncovered a private artist development contract from a defunct production label tied to Bad Boy Entertainment. Buried deep inside page 19, paragraph 4, subject agrees to adhere to influence conditioning during all appearances under the Velvet Clause. It wasn't a metaphor. The Velvet Clause, once believed to be poetic paranoia, was real. A mechanism of emotional modulation, behavioral control, and appearance compliance, hidden under the guise of branding. Michael knew. He warned his daughter. He kept the receipts. And James Laurel, standing before the court, delivered one more revelation. "The last night I worked for Michael, he hugged me and said, 'You know why they hate me? Because I sing without the system.' Then he added, 'If they ever come for Paris, tell her I never signed it.'" The courtroom froze, because that statement, once cryptic, now had context. If the Velvet Clause was indeed used to manipulate rising artists into long-term compliance, then Michael's refusal wasn't just a career choice. It was an act of resistance, and it may have cost him everything. Before leaving the stand, James handed over a sealed envelope labeled MJ/PJ Echo Log. Prosecutors confirmed it contained security logs, voice notes, and studio entries, now under forensic review. So where does that leave us? Paris has the letter. James has the memories. The documents back up the code. The witnesses repeat the same terms. The rooms, the light, the silence, all matching. And Diddy's empire now faces not just allegations of personal misconduct, but the possibility of being a courier for something larger. But the question remains, was Michael Jackson the first to escape or the first to be sacrificed? And if Paris is now the one to carry the message, what happens if the court finally listens? As the trial reached its most surreal phase, one question loomed over the courtroom, like a shadow in waiting. What exactly was the system Michael Jackson warned about, and was Diddy merely a participant or something more? That's when the court called a new witness, a data forensic specialist, not an artist, not a former employee, but a tech investigator embedded within a recent FBI task force assigned to review encrypted documents tied to Bad Boy Entertainment and affiliated media entities. And the first words out of his mouth changed everything. The Velvet Clause wasn't unique. It was a template. According to his analysis, the Velvet Clause appears not only in one contract, but in 14, buried inside, artist development agreements, performance writer addendums, and consulting attachments, across at least 3 entertainment conglomerates. But what truly stunned the room, one clause had been updated as recently as 2019. Let's break that down. The Velvet Clause, as defined in the documents, requires emotional regulation during public appearances, permits sensory reorientation sessions in silent or curved rooms, mandates approval from external consultants prior to unscripted speaking events, and includes a line about resonance compliance, vague but chilling. This isn't just branding, the specialist said. This is sound behavior management. It's programming through presence, and it gets deeper. One particular file buried within a failed artist mentorship app linked to a Diddy-backed shell company contained onboarding modules. Labeled simply S1 through S7, each module included language on identity disassociation, light testing performed under tinted mirrored lighting, loop phrasing repeating core ideas until reaction fades, controlled environment training with voice suppression feedback. This was not a theory. These were corporate modules, legally formatted, digitally signed. Who signed them? Alias names, proxy initials, but one name kept reappearing across access logs, Luca S. The same name that appeared in the email, Paris Jackson received the one inviting her to become a message carrier. And that term, message carrier, now shows up in at least 3 federal affidavits. One dancer testified she was told her choreography would convey signals. A stylist explained she was trained to dress for behavioral cues. And now we had digital documents instructing applicants to limit improvisation unless pre-cleared. Back in court, Paris Jackson listened in silence. Her earlier claim that she was contacted as part of a posthumous activation plan suddenly felt far less conspiratorial. It felt procedural. So who was orchestrating this? Was Diddy, the architect, or something else? Michael's journal, which had been quietly turned over to the court through his estate, included a strange entry. The courier isn't the destination, he delivers the room, not the reason. And right below it, a phrase underlined twice. SC is not a producer, he is a system. For months, the initials SC have been speculated to refer to Sean Combs' Diddy. But what if SC is also shorthand for something else? Systemic control, structured conditioning. The forensic specialist didn't speculate. But he did present one more digital key, a USB recovered from Michael's private archives. It was labeled Red Echo Collapse Draft WAV. The court listened in full. It was not music. It was a patterned sequence of sounds loops, layered with white noise and faint harmonic fragments, buried within an AI voice repeating, "If you feel this, you've already entered." Then silence. Then Paris's voice, aged perhaps 9 or 10, speaking clearly, "Daddy says it's only a system if we believe the echo is ours." The audio stunned the room. Even the prosecutors didn't object. They needed a moment to process it. And yet, just as the court began to settle back into disbelief, a new layer dropped. The Jackson Vault. The subcommittee assigned to review unreleased estate materials confirmed that over 120 unreleased journal pages, voice memos, and secure audio logs are now under forensic review. Among them, a list of 14 names cross-referenced with appearances in Diddy's event logs. Notable contracts with phrasing eerily similar to the Velvet Clause, and at least one direct reference to a mirror room scenario dated months before Michael's death. Suddenly, the line between paranoia and preparation blurred. What Michael described, the rooms, the curved spaces, the voice suppression, the light distortion, matched every detail Paris had claimed, and now matched testimony from dancers, stylists, and security staff once employed by Diddy-affiliated ventures. So, why was this never exposed before fear or belief? As one anonymous witness reportedly told investigators, "You don't talk about the echo if you're still in it." But Paris was no longer in it. She stood before the court not as a legacy under threat, but as a messenger by choice, a voice unlocked. And yet that final question hung in the air. If Diddy was just a courier, who designed the message? As court resumed the next morning, a subpoena was issued for a former executive at one of the development guilds, referenced by Paris. Rumors swirled that another celebrity once rumored to be trapped in the same ecosystem was prepared to testify. And now, for the first time in the trial, the public, the press, and even the courtroom seemed to understand. This wasn't just a trial about Diddy. It was about control, voice, memory, legacy, and a system that called itself entertainment, but operated like a ritual. It began not with a bang, but a whisper. A final file retrieved not from the Jackson estate, but from a courtroom evidence bag, sealed, encrypted, and marked only with one phrase, "If she ever speaks." That file, played before the courtroom in total silence, brought the entire case full circle. It contained a single document, digitally signed and authenticated by Michael Jackson's personal archivist and codename expert. Its title, "The Ones Who Escaped." 14 names, each with 2 dates, one marked entry and one marked withdrawal. 3 names had both. 11 were blank. The file name, Paris M. Jackson. Entry A, withdrawal initiated. The courtroom collectively exhaled. This wasn't speculation anymore. It was data, recorded, time-stamped, and buried in a system so paranoid about its exposure that it encrypted its own exits. The judge, stunned, called an unscheduled recess, but the clock wouldn't stop ticking. By the time court resumed, the news had already spread. Michael Jackson may have created the first ever coded resistance archive from within the entertainment machine. What had once been dismissed as eccentricity, his mirror obsessions, curved architecture, cryptic phrases like "don't sign in rooms with no corners," now held a forensic truth the world wasn't ready for. So, what happened next? The prosecution pivoted. What had begun as a criminal trial against Sean "Diddy" Combs for abuse and trafficking now stood at the edge of something bigger, an inquiry into behavioral manipulation, corporate grooming, and multi-level psychological conditioning through media environments. The FBI issued a supplemental request, full access to the vault drive, and in that drive was the final piece of the puzzle. A clip dated March 2007, Michael speaking directly to camera. They keep calling it branding, but branding used to mean pain. It still does, just no more iron, just lights, approval, and silence. He stares forward. If they ever take my voice, let hers be heard. Because I made her remember, not echo, and that's what Paris did. She returned to the stand, calm, deliberate. Her voice now steadier than ever. This isn't just about my father. It's about all the girls who were told they were being elevated when they were really being exchanged. She opened a small red folder. Inside, a contract, her contract, the one she never signed. The court allowed her to read one line aloud. The artist agrees to emotional licensing under the Velvet Clause, including image-induced calibration and reverb protocol. She paused. They wanted my face, my sound, but not myself. And he told me, never give away what sings inside you. But perhaps the most revealing moment came when an unexpected witness was called. Former security chief James Laurel. Yes, the same man who protected Michael Jackson during his final years, and the same man who uncovered the mic hidden in a dressing mirror. He stepped forward holding a photo, not of Michael, not of Diddy, but of a red room. It matched descriptions provided by at least 5 victims tied to the Diddy case. Circular architecture, no hard edges, velvet seating, no visible cameras, but a single vent system aligned with a mirrored dome. What was this room? According to James, they call it the chamber, a place where they test obedience without asking permission. You don't get instructions, just silence. You perform or you disappear. James testified that Michael was once invited to perform in such a room. He refused, said it felt more like a ritual than a rehearsal, and when he said no, suddenly his tour was delayed. Sponsors backed out, the paparazzi surged, lawsuits followed, his narrative unraveled. Was that retaliation or just coincidence? The prosecution chose not to respond, but Paris did. He wasn't perfect, but he was right. And when I was 10, he made me promise if they ever offer me light I can't explain to ask who's watching it reflect. That promise brought her to this courtroom, and now everything has changed. Multiple subpoenas have been issued to private music guilds once tied to development contracts, to architectural firms specializing in curved studio construction, to shell companies tracing back to PR intermediaries tied to the phrase influence modulation. But most notably, a second witness list is being drafted not for this trial, but for a new investigation. The courtroom now recognizes this case not as the end of a prosecution, but the beginning of an exposure, not of one man, but of an entire system of silence. And in the center of it all, not a victim, not just a daughter, but a voice that said, "I don't echo, I remember." As Paris walked down from the stand for the final time, she left behind more than testimony. She left a blueprint of survival, of resistance, of legacy that sings back. And the question now isn't whether Diddy will face consequences, it's whether we're ready to listen to what comes next. Are we ready to examine every studio, every contract, every smile, every velvet room? Because somewhere in all that echo, the truth never stopped singing. The courtroom was still, but no one believed the story had ended. With Paris Jackson's final words still echoing, "I don't echo, I remember." What had begun as a focused trial on Sean Diddy Combs now cracked open into something more complex, a cultural reckoning hiding behind contracts, brands, and manufactured fame. But what exactly was the Velvet Clause? New forensic analysis, released just days after Paris's testimony, confirmed that the clause wasn't symbolic, it was operational. A real legal mechanism woven into entertainment contracts under vague language that referred to influence conditioning, emotional modulation, resonance dampening protocols, appearance-controlled calibration, terms that to a lawyer might seem harmless, to an artist meaningless, but to investigators alarming. A deeper dive by a cross-agency forensic committee found nearly 22 contracts from the late 2000s to early 2010s using versions of the Velvet Clause. Each is tied to individuals associated with underground artist development consortia, most with indirect links to Bad Boy Entertainment or its financial satellites. Many of those contracts included non-disclosure agreements. Others invoked silent performance environments and voice loop rehearsal suites descriptors that now match survivor testimonies, and most disturbingly, the architectural blueprints recovered from Diddy's Hollywood Hills property. And here's where it got darker. One of those contracts was signed by a then 19-year-old backup vocalist, listed only as Subject DE12, who disappeared from all industry credits just 6 months later. Her legal representative speaking anonymously confirmed she was institutionalized after what was described as a performance psychotic break during a session labeled loop verification. What happened in that room? No one knows because no recording devices were permitted, but one internal report later leaked described the objective of that session as testing artist response to dissonant echo under synthetic light cascade. Let that sink in. Not a concert, not a recording, a reaction test. And it's not just about Diddy anymore. The shock waves from this case reached well beyond one man's reputation. Former executives at 3 major labels were called in for questioning. 2 resigned. A third submitted a private memo admitting the existence of a feedback initiative, a program allegedly used to evaluate how well certain artists could anchor emotional loops for mass audience modulation. This isn't just about grooming. It's about calibration, the manipulation of voice, image, and message to generate emotional consistency across consumer behavior. If that sounds like science fiction, ask why 14 names were found on the file, the ones who escaped. Ask why only 3 had withdrawal dates. Ask why the FBI has now labeled certain entertainment guilds as behavioral influence hubs. And ask yourself this: if Michael Jackson tried to expose this in 2008, why did no one listen? Because the velvet is soft, because the lights are blinding, because success in the entertainment industry often depends on silence, not just legally but spiritually. You say yes to the image, to the photo shoot, to the foundation. But what if behind it all there's a test you didn't know you were taking? In court, a silent detail returned to center stage one, dismissed in early proceedings. A studio blueprint from 2011 titled Phase C. It included a visual reorientation chamber, an echo loop evaluation zone, a non-cornered sensory filtration room. Terms that made no sense until Paris testified, until Michael's letter emerged, until it was no longer a theory but a map. One investigator commented off the record, "If this system exists and all signs point to yes, it wasn't just for control, it was for containment. To silence the ones who felt too much, remembered too clearly, or refused to echo what they were told." By the end of week 6, the DOJ confirmed the opening of a special task force to re-examine historic artist contracts, particularly those involving influence minors, early-stage artist mentorship programs, and underground artist testing facilities. Sean Combs remains the face of the original trial, but the system has no face. Only corridors, curved walls, soft lights, velvet. One federal agent told a press briefing, "We're no longer looking at a predator, we're looking at an ecosystem." And the public is beginning to ask questions that reach further than a single verdict. How many artists were silenced before they could speak? How many voices were curated, looped, then discarded? How many careers were shaped not by talent but by compliance? In the final minutes of court on day 42, Paris Jackson stood one more time. She said nothing. Instead, she held up the red bracelet her father gave her, the one with the shard of mirror, and for a moment, under the fluorescent court lighting, the glass caught a reflection. Not of Diddy, not of the judge, but of herself, whole, present, unchanged, unloved. The court went into recess. But the conversation, now global, is just beginning. Because this case no longer asks, "Is he guilty?" It asks, "How long have we been echoing, and who else is still trapped in velvet?"